Hey, welcome to a Climate Conversation podcast. We are thrilled that you are joining us. And this is precipitated because of the film, A Climate Conversation, which you can watch for free at aclimateconversation.com. And it is the project, it's been something that's been on the heart of Walt Johnson. Walt is a geophysicist. He's been in that business for over 50 years. And he just wanted to have an honest conversation about this whole thing regarding climate. So he and his wife, Rami, actually stepped up, took money out of their retirement account to fund a climate conversation movie. And again, you can find that at climateconversation.com. And so this has been a great journey as we have brought more people in to talk about this. And first of all, Walt, it's great to be doing this. I'm so excited about this podcast that we're recording.
Thank you, Kim. I'm enjoying it too. And thank you for all that you've done for this movement. I appreciate it.
Well, it's on your heart. It's on my heart. And so thank you for the just the vision to do this. And then spokesperson for A Climate Conversation, Dave O'Rourke. Great to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And our guest today is one of my favorite people in this whole arena, and that is Daniel Turner. He is the founder of Power the Future. Daniel, it is such a delight to have you here.
It's always great to be on with you, Kim. Thank you. And great to be on with you two gentlemen as well.
Thank you.
So Daniel, tell us about Power the Future. What is it? How did you come up with the vision for Power the Future?
I started this organization a couple of years ago. I was always in the political space and in the advocacy space. I loved energy issues and readily admit I wasn't anything of an energy expert at the time. But I struggled with the disconnect from a communications perspective, from a policy perspective. I struggled with the disconnect between the men and women who made energy policy and the people who were affected by it. Because when you think about it, our energy policy is made by an elite few. They live in New York and DC and San Francisco, and a lot of the billionaire activists who fund climate groups and green groups. They live in a very small few communities. But energy is actually produced in rural America: oil, gas, coal, fracking, pipelines. The energy policies are lived by men and women who are voiceless and powerless. And when energy policy is decided, they don't always take those folks into consideration. I live very close to Appalachia in West Virginia. I actually started it because of the coal industry. And I watched what 8 years of Obama did to coal miners. And the sort of blasé attitude that we left thousands, tens of thousands of men and women in their communities in absolute poverty because we decided we didn't want coal anymore. And no one went back to try to rescue them. No one offered them a lifeline. We gave them fentanyl. We told them to drive for Uber or learn to code, and we just ignored them. And I realized that this was a really pernicious movement, the Green Movement, and these men and women in rural America needed a voice. We, for a couple of years, saw things change under the previous administration, but boy, we're back in the trenches where every day you can see policy that comes from this administration that impacts these millions. 18 million Americans work directly and indirectly in oil, gas, coal pipelines, fracking, et cetera. And they needed a voice, and Power of the Future tries to be their voice.
Well, I love that. And let's draw the connection, connect the dots between what you're talking about in rural America. But the dot that needs to be connected is these people in rural America in the oil and gas and coal industries is providing reliable, efficient, abundant, and affordable energy for everyday people. Yeah. And so when we look at the attack upon the oil, gas, and coal industry, it's not just that industry. It is actually an attack upon the prosperity and the thriving people being able to start their businesses, go after their dreams, take their kids to soccer practice. That's what's really under attack, Daniel Turner.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of the fascinating things about energy just as a policy issue, because energy is everything. It's every product that we make is either manufactured or grown or irrigated or harvested or transported. All that requires energy. But it also it's medical issues, right? The amount of millions of products in the medical industry that are fossil fuel products. It's rubber and plastic and car tires and cement and steel, sure, but then it becomes larger. It's world policy. It's look what's happening in the Middle East. Why is Russia invading Ukraine? Well, we made Russia really rich by punishing the oil and gas industry. The Biden administration drove prices through the roof. Who benefited from that? Oil companies, sure. There's no doubt. And you saw the Biden administration blast them for greed. But Iran got rich. And what did they do with their money? Russia got rich. What did they do with their money? Right. So it's foreign policy. And it's even greater than foreign policy and greater than petrochemical products. It's human dignity. And that's the heart of why I love energy and why I fight for it, because fossil fuels are the great equalizer. Humanity has had a miserable existence for tens of thousands of years. We've been hungry and cold and poor and dirty and in fear, right? And fossil fuels has given the vast majority of the world and everyone in our country dignity, right? There's dignity in surviving the elements. There's dignity in not having to live in your own filth. There's dignity in hygiene. There's dignity in comfort products of pants and disposable diapers and tissues. You can blow your nose, and there's dignity in fossil fuels has elevated humanity to a level that we've never experienced before. And all that's on the line. And that's why I fight for this industry so hard. It's yes, jobs and yes, foreign policy, but human dignity itself is on the line with fossil fuels.
Well, it really is. And human flourishing and this American dream that people can go after their hopes and dreams. Dave O'Rourke, I know that you've put together some really great questions for Daniel, and so I'm going to throw it over to you.
Well, I'm fascinated by the entire topic. My first role is to encourage everyone to watch this important movie. So let me just take a quick moment and say that we've had wonderful feedback from people who've seen it. This includes me and people that I love who've learned an amazing amount in 1 hour. And the most common response that I've had from people is, I didn't know that. How come no one ever told me that? That's not what I heard before. This is different. And so I can't encourage people enough to go to aclimateconversation.com. And there are a number of different ways you can watch this film. It's been played on Newsmax a number of times. You can get a DVD and you can share that DVD with others. We want you to see this movie. We think when you see it, you'll be equipped to engage at a rational level. So please visit aclimateconversation.com. And you're going to find, and this is what I'm fascinated by, you were talking about, how did Russia get rich, and what were the inputs that led to that? Because this is a national security question for Americans. I mean, people portray this as the planet and the war, the globe, the world. I mean, no one ever says that climate change is happening in Peoria, Illinois, and only there, right? It's as universal as it can be made. And yet it affects Americans profoundly. Because of the investments, if you want to think of it that way, the spending that we're doing and the edicts and the executive orders and other actions that are taking that amount in many ways to a giant taking. And I know Walt has some specific, points of view about this, because I believe the United States is the only country that allows for the private ownership of minerals. I think the United States is unique in this regard. So I'm interested in things like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and what that means. But at the end of the day, two things that I think are really critically important. What is the benefit of spending all this money? That's one. And two, are we actually solving a problem? Does a problem exist? And this gets down to do rising temperatures the result of increased CO2? As basic as that. And if you watch this movie, I think you'll come away with an opinion that maybe those two things are not correlated the way we think. So the national security angle and the cost benefit associated with the advocacy from the alarmist side, you're the perfect person to ask about this.
I don't know about that, but thank you. I will reiterate what you said. It is a brilliant film, and I encourage people to watch it. When Kim allowed me to see it early, I actually asked if I could keep the link and watch it a couple more times before it was public, because it's so well done. And I think the title shows you something that is unique to us, our side, if we want to call it that. I want to have a conversation on that, and we can have a conversation. I don't think John Kerry would ever sit down with us and talk. I don't think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would ever have this conversation. I don't think climate scientists who are pushing these ideas would ever talk to us. There's no conversation. They'll tell you that. The science is settled. Chuck Todd, the famous host of MSNBC and Meet the Press, said, "I will not have climate deniers on my show. There's no space for them." So that's it, right? If that's a pretty mainstream, well, used to be mainstream show, but mainstream show, we're not welcome. Our point of view isn't welcome. So the fact that it's called a climate conversation, I think is so important, because there is a need for a robust conversation. I think I can answer both of your questions in just phenomenology, which is the experience and observation, epistemology based on experience. And maybe that's why you believe less in climate change the older you get, because you have more experience. But anyone of a certain age has to realize we've been talking about this for a very long time, and really nothing has changed. If anything, the world has gotten better. I can remember, and I will be 50 this year, so I'm very excited about that. But I can remember being in high school when the very first IPCC reports on global warming were starting to be dire, where they talked about the Maldives being underwater by the year 2000. Bangladesh was supposed to be underwater by the year 2000. IPCC doesn't make those concrete claims anymore, right? Because they're too risky. So now they just talk about catastrophe writ large, but they used to actually make concrete claims. Now that I've been hearing this for 35 years, still, right? We're still being told that any day now the world is coming to an end. Look at human mortality rates. The COVID window aside, because clearly that was an anomaly. But look at the health of the planet, of humanity. Look at the health of the planet, the health of the world. We've flourished more and more. We become richer and healthier, and we're so rich and healthy that our poor people's biggest problem is obesity. I mean, think about the conundrum, think about the oxymoron of that. Our poor Americans' biggest problem is that they have obesity. That's how much we have flourished, maybe to a bad extent, as a people. So what is this problem we're trying to solve? Where is it? And the fact that they can't point to it is why they have to speak in platitudes. John Kerry at Dubai was talking about how 7 million people every year die from climate change. Just, can I meet one? Right? Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez will say that communities all across America are being poisoned from fracking. Name one, right? Just show me the one kid who died from climate change. Show me the one family that is sick from fracking. And if they existed, CNN would have their camera set up on the front lawn and they'd be there 24/7. But they can't. They can't point to specific examples. But we can point to specific examples of how we have gotten better, how the world has become healthier. Are hurricanes stronger? No. That's why they measure hurricanes in cost now, right? We have 400,000 more Americans in Florida than we did 5 years ago. Every one of them has a $900 phone. They probably have 4 or 5 flat screen TVs. They have 3 SUVs. Hurricanes are exactly the same, but the costs have gone up. Absolutely, the costs have gone up. So how do they measure hurricanes? In cost. Well, that's supposed to predict climate change, right? So phenomenologically, just that understanding from Edith Stein and Husserl of understand epistemology based on experience. Our experience has been life is really, really good. So what's the problem? They have to invent the problem, and that's where we are right now, trying to invent a problem that doesn't exist.
But Daniel, what I see is then this problem that doesn't exist is being used to, and this is something that is near and dear to Walt's heart, is takings.
Yes.
It's the takings from everyday people through fees and taxes, but also, and Walt, why don't you address this, the takings, of people's property? And I know you're super concerned about that.
Yes, here in Colorado, we've taken a very aggressive tactic to get rid of oil and gas, basically. And it's very difficult to get a drilling permit. It goes between, let's say, a group of lawyers to get the permit first. And I don't know if we issue anymore. They don't want to issue anymore. They ran a voter initiative that was turned down. Then our legislature passed one that was even more difficult. And so that's a taking. And many farmers throughout the West own their mineral rights. My grandfather had 3 sections east of town, and he made sure that when he picked up his acreage, he owned the mineral rights. Mm-hmm. He never did benefit from it, but had he kept the farm and had we stayed there, probably all these grandchildren would have retired easily on the benefits of that, because the Niobrara play broke out, and they've done a lot of leasing, and they paid a lot of money, at least, for the right to drill it. A lot of that has gone. And a lot of farmers do depend on the benefit from their mineral rights. And I know that from down in Southwest Colorado, where I grew up. I knew the farmers intimately, and they relied on it. They don't talk about it. It's rather curious. They're farmers in their nature and mind, but they depend on a little bit of override that they get on minerals in their property. And so we are taking that. And I was involved with marginally on a situation where someone took the county of Boulder to court, and they did win, but they didn't win much because their mineral rights were taken. But anyway, all along, we're not benefiting from that. And it's unfortunate that we don't. And we are one of the few people in the world that have mineral rights owned by private citizens. And the reason I got into that, one time I had a client who was the Emir of Dubai, and he was testing some ideas. And I said, well, why in the world do you have to come over here to test your ideas? And he's knowledgeable, knows the world. And he says, well, that's the only country in the world that has private ownership of minerals.
Yeah.
So he tested it. His idea didn't work, but that was interesting. It got me to thinking. And yes, here in our country, when we're founded, people were so tired of going to the king to get permission for something, they gave private ownership of the minerals to people. I thought that's good.
Well,
yeah, and I think you're pointing out something which is just so uniquely American, and in our globalist society, we tend to think that we're all equal, and we're not. All cultures aren't equal. All governments aren't equal. You look with glee on the Irish Parliament, which is sending people to jail for Facebook posts. Same with the British, right? They don't have the same concept of free speech. They may have had John Stuart Mill, but they don't have the same concept of free speech that we do and private property that we do. And so you're hitting something that is uniquely American, but I think that's why we're up against this huge climate cabal. Is I do think there is a large part of the world and human nature which is controlling. You can call them communists, you can call them statists, fascists. There's lots of ways to clarify them and quantify them, but I think we are the anomaly. We're the radicals that believe in freedom. If you are the Biden administration, you don't believe in freedom. You believe in government, and government has to tell you what car you need to drive, what stove you need to own. Government needs to tell you, because you can't have that right on your own. And it seems strange for us as Americans to say, well, what do you mean you're going to tell me what type of stove I can have because of climate change? I think what Joe Biden is doing is the norm. Quite frankly, I think we're the exception, that we are the true believers in freedom. But what Joe Biden is doing, what the rest of the world is doing, what they do in Dubai, you don't own your property. You don't own your rights. You don't own the right to make those decisions. The state does, the government does, the king does, the Shah does, whatever the power system, is. We are so unique in our country. America is genuinely a singular bastion of freedom that is under attack. Climate is just the guise to launch this attack, but it's the same attack that you see that we've been up against as long as we've been around. There are people who want to control us. Now they're just using climate as the excuse.
If I could add to my diatribe, as a result of us having laws that were good and fair and private ownership of minerals, it's not an accident that the modern oil and gas industry, now China did something 2,000 years ago, but the modern one appeared in Titusville, Pennsylvania, where the first well was drilled. Do you know where the second field was? Colorado.
I was going to say Oklahoma, Colorado.
And I've had the opportunity to work in it, not when it was discovered, but, later on.
That's good to clarify that.
I got to work for the landowner, the farmer out there, hired me to do some work to evaluate what's underneath his ground. So it was fun for me to get to do that.
Wow. That's great.
That's awesome.
So can we develop a little bit more this taking idea, because you rarely hear it spoken of. There's also public ownership of minerals in the United States underneath all the federal lands, which are enormous. I mean, I think it's 70% of Idaho is federal government. So Idaho itself as a state is a little thing. Idaho, the federal thing, is much larger. Yesterday, I'm pretty sure Biden closed down through edict a giant natural gas facility. And so those are the people's energy. That belongs to all of us. And when executive orders take that from us, things cost 30% more now than they did 3 years ago. And they're unlikely to roll back those prices. And so when you look at the state of the United States, and I most of my career has been in asset management in the financial industry. And we're confronted with news about inflation, interest rates, recession threats, unemployment, serious concerns in the supply chain. All of these appear to be man-made disasters in the United States, functions of policy that in the way our normal enterprise operates, none of those things would be happening today. And all of them are linked. It's weird. You say, what do interest rates have to do with climate change? Well, it turns out they have a lot to do with it. And so we're looking now, and it's a part of the film. We asked Ken Gregory from the Friends of Science, Walt did this in Calgary to estimate, what's all this going to cost to go to net zero? And it staggers the imagination to think what it is. What we've seen in terms of increased costs already, which are very significant, not to mention people freezing to death, not to mention that, the cost in humanity. And just as a quick aside, I want to say there is one victim of climate change. There's a teenager in Norway who's lost her mind over climate. We know that there's one casualty of this thing. So my question is, when is this bill going to come due? When are the American people going to find out that every taxpayer is expected to pay another $1 million on top of the $100,000 in national debt they already own?
Yeah, I think the best indicator of future activities are what's happened in the past. And so to look at what America's future is going to look like, we just have to look at what's already happened. And so I'm going to go across the ocean and look at Germany. They are a good 20 years ahead of us on the climate craze. Since the early 2000s, they have invested close to €500 billion, so roughly $500 billion just in wind turbines, building wind turbines, et cetera, because of climate change. Shuttered most of their all of their coal plant. Angela Merkel shuttered all of their nuclear plants. Remember, she shuttered their nuclear plants after the tsunami in Fukushima, Japan, because she said nuclear was too much of a risk. You wanted to say that if you have a tsunami hitting Germany, trust me, your nuclear reactors are the least of your worries, right? You've got bigger fish to fry if you're worried about a tsunami in Germany. But that was the rationale. So they had to close their nuclear program. So it's been 20 years. It's been $500 billion. what's happening with German economy. In the last couple of years, it's been the only European nation whose economy has contracted. They were paying around 8 cents per kilowatt hour in the year 2000. It got up to $7 per kilowatt hour last year until the German parliament had to freeze it at 40 cents. It still costs $7, but the government is subsidizing the rest, and they're charging no more than 40 cents now by German law. As a comparison, we're paying around 16 cents per kilowatt hour in America. We used to pay 11. Now we're paying 16 because of Biden. Germany's paying 40. So my question for Germany is $500 billion, 20 years. Your electric grid is unstable. You're cowering before Vladimir Putin. Your economy is contracting, and you're paying 3 times the American cost for electricity. When does it work? Right? When does the good part of going green kick in? When do we see the benefits? When do we hear about the cost savings? John Kerry will tell us how the wind is free, right? Wind and solar are cheaper, they'll tell us, than fossil fuels. Well, that's a flat out lie. So when does so if Germany hasn't done this, and they have 100% support, right? Every member of Germany, parliament, left and right, they're all on board with this. So when does it work? Domestically, look at California. When does it work? Who's stopping Gavin Newsom from his climate ambition? When does it work? You know, Gavin Newsom is buying coal-powered electricity from Utah and Nevada because his electric grid is crumbling. But of course, he doesn't tell anyone that. He just says that we're, diversifying our electric grid. So when does California's work? So when people ask, well, when is it going to kick in? And that's just electricity. And electricity is a small part of what we use our fossil fuels for. And that's a disaster. There is no place on the planet that has gone green that has had success. If we define success as cost, efficiency, reliability, if you define success as feeling good, maybe you can all claim success. But there is no place on the planet that has gone green that it has worked. So why do we think it's going to be any different in America? Why do we think we've suddenly figured out the formula? It's the same lie as the socialists will tell you when you point to East Germany. And they're like, well, that wasn't real socialism. How about Cuba? That wasn't real socialism. How about Venezuela? That wasn't real socialism. Well, when does it work? When I get it, right? I know how I will make real socialism. The Greens are exactly the same. It hasn't worked anywhere, but you trust John Kerry enough and he'll get it to work. That's what we're told.
Well, and Daniel, I think you're bringing up an important point, and it's taken a while for me to learn this, but the green in the green energy movement is not about energy. It's about the green that's going into people's pockets.
Absolutely.
And just a quick question. You mentioned Germany. Have you seen much regarding the German farmers and their protests regarding diesel prices?
Yeah. If I didn't do energy policy, farm policy, having a small farm here in Virginia, I feel like it would be my next great love, because they're the next victims of the green movement. Absolutely. And the European Union has put down these staggering climate conditions on the farm community, and the farmers are fighting back, and God love them, in France and Belgium and Germany. And the fight is, I don't want to say violent, but they are aggressive, right? They are not.
Peaceful. They're actually peaceful.
They're peaceful, but they're forceful, right? They are making their voices heard, and I think that's essential, because this is people's livelihood. These are people's land. It's people's tradition, people's culture, right? Farmers are a culture. Coal miners are a culture, and we talk so much about the love of culture, but the Greens have no problem destroying cultures that don't conform to their agenda.
But what will happen if you destroy the farmer? You destroy the person that produces food, which means the next thing is people start to go hungry.
Yeah. 100%. It's why our poor have an obesity problem, because we have an enormous abundance of food, and we have an enormous abundance of, up till now, has been relatively inexpensive food because of fossil fuels. And you would think people would look at that as a great thing, right? We when you see these famines around the world, remember Live Aid and Feed the World and in Africa, who came to the rescue? Yeah, the Europeans did a little bit, but it was us, right? We always are the go-to for famine around the world because we have this enormous surplus of food. They estimate that we throw away more than a third of our food. That's how much we produce for relatively no cost because of fossil fuels. Isn't that something to celebrate, that we're not hungry, that we're not malnourished? But no, the left sees it as something bad, something to destroy. It shows you the nature of the opponent we're up against. They're not, these are misanthropic people. They genuinely hate humanity, and that's why they're our threat.
And that, Daniel, I think that is the thing for everyday people. It's difficult for them to believe that there would be people in positions of power that are anti-human. And that's one of the things that I learned from the film. And I know that, Dave, that's one of the things that you realized regarding the film.
There was a comedian, Daniel, happy birthday. 50 is a big one. There's no looking back.
I got a couple months to go still. But thank you.
Golden years are golden. Okay. It's like they say, nothing good happens after midnight. Everything good happens after 50 has been my experience. Some of the excess energy has been burned off and you can focus on the things that really matter. There was a comedian that people Walt's age and my age would remember named Mort Saul. And he was very funny, but he was a Serbic guy. And he was on the Jack Parr show or Johnny Carson in the early days of Vietnam. And he was asked what did he think about, the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. And he said, well, sometimes you have to kill people. How else are they going to learn? That stuck with me my whole life. Kim, when you say people are going to die, I think that's the goal. That's a feature, not a bug of what's happening here. And who gets to decide? This is a thing I'm fascinated by. We talk about the planet, and it's anthropomorphism, right? You've made the planet into a person, and now you get to decide based on a person's biology how well the planet is doing. We're killing the planet. Well, my understanding is that if the planet were greener, that would be healthier for the planet, right? That if there was more CO2 in the atmosphere, you'd have a more thriving ecosystem, which is 100% correlated with thriving humanity, by the way. We know this. So this is the thing. It seems to me that we have these two things. People are feeling the cost. I have these notes from your website. You talked about Germany, that Britain's paid an average of $228 per megawatt for energy. In the United States, it's 27.
Yeah.
27, 228 there. We have a more robust economy. We have a more responsive economy. We have a more, my dog is crazy. We have a lot of advantages that the Britons don't enjoy, and it cannot hurt them to pay 8 times. So there's a cross between a realization that we're buying a thing that isn't benefiting us, right? We're spending a lot of money on a thing that has no visible benefit. We had Greg Wrightstone from the CO2 Coalition on the podcast last time. He went to some effort to explain that even if we're able to achieve net zero in the countries that are trying to do it, it's probably not going to have a measurable impact. It won't have an impact you can feel, for sure. It won't. But it won't really change anything in terms of the things that they say need to be changed. It's fruitless, and yet it's expensive as hell. And the earth is greening. 80% of the earth is greener than it was 30 years ago. Desertification isn't happening. The seas aren't rising. There's more polar bears than there were. So at what point does this pain and fruitlessness cross over?
Well, it's the risk of the problem with having political ends and political goals. And net zero is a political goal. The dates are political. We will be net zero by 2050. How about 2045? All right, 2045. Why was that date chosen? Biden says by the year 2030, 33% of all cars have to be EV. Why 33%? Why 2030? Those are political numbers. And when you have political numbers, well, now you have to use the power of government to achieve those numbers. And we see how well that's looked in the past. President Bush, God love him, had a goal by 2006, X% of Americans had to own homes. That was the goal. We can talk about the housing crisis and what caused it, but that was a political goal. Do we underwrite loans for every single person who couldn't afford a house? Probably, but we had a political goal, and we did everything possible to achieve that political goal using government, bastardizing government to achieve this goal. And that's what the Biden administration is doing. If you have a political goal that says we need more EVs, okay, well, then market forces say we need a lot more copper, because every EV has around 60 pounds of copper in it. So we need to open up copper mines. Well, we have a copper mine in Pebble in Alaska. The Biden administration denied its permitting. We have a huge copper discovery in Minnesota in Twin Metals. The Biden administration denied its permitting. You say, well, why did you deny the permitting for the copper mine? Well, because of climate change. Yeah, but we need copper because of the EVs, because of climate change. And now you're in the circle of stupid. Right? Like, because you know why? These aren't market decisions. They're not decisions based on freedom. They're not decisions based on a free people. They're political decisions. So nothing makes sense whatsoever. You look at the decisions the Biden administration has done to punish oil and gas because they hate this industry. As I said at the outset, what it did is it drove the price through the roof. In America, if you're an oil owner, you did well. I'm not going to deny it. They did very well the last couple of years, but so did Vladimir Putin. And what did he do with his money? Well, he invaded Ukraine. And then there's Joe Biden with Ukraine lapel and President Zelensky saying we have to stand with Ukraine. That's great. The way to stand with Ukraine, bankrupt Russia. The way to bankrupt Russia, allow us to drill for oil. You can't drill for oil. Well, then you're not going to bankrupt Putin. So now you're in the circle of stupid on foreign policy. The Houthis have launched another attack a couple hours ago on the British Navy. A couple of missiles hit one of a cruiser. Where did the Houthis get all their money? They got it from Iran. Why? Because of what we did with oil prices. How do we bankrupt Iran? Let us drill for oil domestically. Can't do that. Circle of stupid. And so the problem with political decisions is that you manipulate free people, free markets, and government to achieve them, and you just create utter chaos. And that's where we are right now. We're trying to make sense of all of the circle of stupid, and it's all because we have a political agenda that is not based in fact, science, freedom, free markets. It's just all and boy, when you're in the circle of stupid long enough, you lose understanding of up and down, right? You don't know what's you begin to think you're the crazy one after a while. And I think that's where America as a whole is right now. America is coming out of the circle of stupid saying this isn't right? Like this isn't right. And that's good. We need that awakening.
Well, and one of the reasons that Walt wanted to do this movie is, and we were talking about it pre-show regarding the hockey stick graph, but I want to, and I'm going to throw this over to Walt, but on this whole climate change, it's like, what is the perfect temperature? What year was that achieved? And who decided? I think that those are basic questions that people can ask. So, Walt, I'm going to throw it over to you.
The perfect temperature? All our experts haven't decided what that is.
Okay.
They don't want us to get more than 2 degrees warmer or something. And they do it in Celsius because it sounds scarier. If they said Fahrenheit, it's like 1 degree. And I can't tell the difference in my house if someone turned the thermostat 1 degree, so. And we need to ask those questions. We're doing all this. What's the benefit? And we've had Wrightstone is the proprietor of this IPCC calculator. And we went through that when we're doing the movie, that if America went net zero carbon by 2050, we would lower the temperature of the Earth by 0.07 degrees Fahrenheit. Just think about it.
And how did they know that? Okay, how do they know
That's
that?
what the calculator says, and they don't know it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their calculator.
So yesterday, I did it. So I woke up to snow this morning to go to the studio. I do not recall that it was forecast. And I always like to start a conversation with people in the elevator. It's like, oh, what about the weather? Yeah, I wasn't expecting this. No, I wasn't either. And it's like, well, how on earth are they going to tell us what the temperature is going to be in 100 years if they can't tell us what the weather's going to be like in 24 hours? What do you think, Daniel?
It's why I love the title of the film, which is a climate conversation. And going back to the point I made earlier, I would like to have this conversation. When John Kerry testified before Congress a couple of months ago, maybe about 6 months ago, Congressman Thomas Massey from Kentucky asked him flat out, haven't we known that the Earth has been 30 to 60 degrees warmer in the past? And Kerry said yes. And he said, and there were no humans to cause it. So what happened? And John Kerry basically said, I'm not going to answer that. This is a stupid conversation. I'm not having it. Because if you're John Kerry, you don't have to explain your position. And the Earth has been 60 degrees warmer before, and there were no humans to cause it. But why? And John Kerry, he was asked leaving Davos. A reporter I saw asked him, you're calling for all these changes worldwide. Will you give up your private jet? And again, that's a stupid question. I'm not even haughty. I used to love how Rush Limbaugh always called him the haughty John Kerry. Chest puffed up and he walked away. I'm not answering that question. If you're John Kerry, you don't have to. You don't have to explain yourself to some stupid reporter. You don't have to explain why you have a private jet. As he said, for someone like me, it's the only option, right? John Kerry doesn't have to explain his lifestyle to us. So it answers, in my mind, a huge question about control, about agendas, about freedom. If you do not voluntarily do in your life what you want to use the power of government to mandate other people do, well, then you are just a threat. As far as just plain and simple, right? If you want to ban cigarettes because you think they're bad for your health, have at it. But if you're going to sit there and say, well, I'm going to smoke because I'm allowed, but you can't, no. Now you're just a threat. Now you're a tyrant. And that's what these folks do. John Kerry is not surrendering anything in his lifestyle. More pernicious, I think, is Michael Bloomberg, perhaps one of the most reprehensible persons alive on the planet, worth $80 billion. I don't begrudge him a dime of his wealth, but he spends hundreds of millions and billions of dollars to shut down coal mines around the world and around the country to combat the climate crisis. The guy has 14 homes, right? I don't begrudge him his 14 homes. I wish I had 14 homes. He has a fleet of private jets, a fleet of helicopters, fleets of cars. What will Michael Bloomberg sacrifice for the climate? He won't. He doesn't have to. You do. You have to give up your gas stove. You have to give up your gas leaf blower. You have to curtail your lifestyle for the climate. But individually, they do not. And as soon as you have that disconnect, boy, it starts to sound an awful like the English feudal system, right? Are we in the English Revolution or the American Revolution or the French Revolution, right? Is this our Lord who is telling us that I am allowed these niceties, but you, the mere peasants, are not? I mean, it is the stuff of John Locke and Voltaire and Hobbes and Montesquieu. It is the stuff of revolution that you say, how dare you try to deprive me of this when you yourself enjoy it? And that's what the fossil fuel enemies are doing right now, all of them, and why all of them are a threat to your freedom.
So if I could just, I've seen John Kerry's house in Nantucket. If you've been to Nantucket, you can't miss it. It's the biggest house ever. I don't know, the thing is enormous. It's spectacular. It's at 0 feet above sea level. It might be 1 foot above. And Obama paid what in Martha's Vineyard for his 34 acre beachfront?
18, I think.
Why would you spend $18 million if it's going to be inundated in, I don't know, 5 years or whatever? Pick a number, because that's what they do. They just pick a number. Yeah. So I find it fascinating because while I was listening to you earlier, I kept thinking about the 1775 Tea Party, not the 2010 Tea Party, which was interesting in its own. And you have a story. But this isn't the Jacobean revolution. These aren't the little people that are chopping the heads off the ancien regime. This is crammed down by elites in a performative process in which you call it circle stupid. I think that's wonderful. We're gonna get that on the Climate Conversation website. Uh, can circles of stupidity last forever?
I don't think they can. They need to be perpetuated, right? You need to feed it, and that's kind of explains why they have so much money in these green slush funds. The Inflation Reduction Act, right? Joe Biden calls it the largest investment in climate. It's basically hundreds of billions of dollars to feed the circle of stupid. Kim, as you said, green is green. If we're spending $1 trillion to invest in climate, someone's getting a lot of money. I'm not. The American people aren't, but someone is. Someone's making an awful lot of money, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to protect their assets. This whole election in November is going to be about protecting those assets, because if we're going to continue to invest billions and hundreds or trillions in climate, the best thing you could do right now, especially speaking to someone who is in the finance world, you should open a solar consultancy firm. You can get huge contracts from the government, because that's all they're doing now is writing green checks. So I think that the cycle of stupid, I don't think it can continue unless it's fed. And the best thing that feeds it, of course, is taxpayer money.
Well, and the other thing, the green agenda likes to use the word sustainable. And that is a trigger word that people need to be watching. I'm starting to see that permeate through some of the planning document, the cities and towns here in America. But I wanted to say something very snarky, and that is if John Kerry wants everybody to drive EVs, how about if he starts flying in an EP, an electric plane? How about that?
Good start. Just
Be
put
quite
your money
the
where your
battery.
mouth is. Yep.
Well,
He testified
Walt,
in Congress a
throwing it
couple
over-
years ago that it was his plane. It's his wife's plane, by the way. I don't know if you saw that. Sorry, Kim.
No problem. So, Walt, we've hit on a lot of different things that have been really important to you, these issues. And of course, we got to meet Daniel when he was out in Colorado. Great speech, great information. But what else have we not covered with Daniel that you want to make sure that we cover, Walt?
I think we've covered a lot. I did not go into the fact that we had our freedom, and we did, start the oil industry in Denver, not in the U.S. But we've also innovated a lot of things. Rotary drilling comes from the U.S. All the fracking of horizontal wells, that's come in the U.S., and nobody has been hurt as a result of those. Mm-hmm. So we've innovated a lot here in the U.S. because we've had these opportunities. Mm-hmm. And one other thing I'd like to pop out with, I'd like to make sure that you never work for an oil company, Daniel, because you're the best spokesman for them. They've never had a good spokesman before.
Thank you.
But the thing is, in our first podcast, we had Patrick Moore here, and he was telling us, that was the first time I've heard it. There's no place in the middle of the ocean where all the plastic goes and swirls around and kills all the whales and things. It doesn't exist because we don't have the ability to go look for it. And he wrote a book about that. Well, it kind of went into the background. But then after we talked to Patrick, Colorado has outlawed plastic bags in stores altogether. And that has created quite a little uproar. People are beginning to ask questions, and maybe some things are going to come out of things like that we've passed these stupid laws, and it's hurting people a little more than what they thought.
Yeah. Those are the conveniences of the fossil fuel industry that we've come to take for granted, that has made our life hygienic. It's made our life just a little bit easier. And I don't know if the American people are how much more they're willing to surrender of those things. I mentioned disposable diapers. It wasn't long ago, all of our grandmothers had cloth diapers. That's a big change. Are we willing to go back to that? And we can trickle that down to millions of products that have made our life better. But the reason why we're banning them, I think, when we haven't talked a lot about the green groups, who are our real enemy, and they're so well funded billions of dollars annually, huge staffs. Of course, they're all based in New York and DC and San Francisco, but they all operate as a C4. They hide their funding, and we know for a fact that they're foreign funded. I would love to see these guys in the next administration have to open up their books, because they're foreign agents as far as I'm concerned. 90% of the world's ocean plastic comes from Southeast Asia, the vast majority from India, but an awful lot from China. But 90% of the ocean plastic comes from 7 rivers in Southeast Asia. Why do we have to ban plastic bags? Right? Why do we have to ban plastic straws? And they show you these horrific images of beaches that are strewn with garbage, but then you find out they're in Malaysia, they're in Indonesia. Well, that's terrible, but that's them. Why do I have to give up a plastic spoon? Because they're polluting. So the best way to cover your rear end, these groups fund American think tanks. They fund American green groups that have huge lobbying efforts that say you have to get rid of plastic bans. You have to do this. You have to do that. Who's benefited from all of the fracking bans, right? Foreign countries have benefited from it. Who's benefited from going green? As we've spent $1 trillion on wind and solar and EVs and batteries, 70-80% of it's made in China. China, the premier of China gave a speech at Davos just a couple of days ago, talking about the need for the West to embrace net zero. Of course they want us to embrace net zero. It's great for their economy. We're buying these lousy products that in a free market we would never have purchased, right? You don't think the free market of your local utility would have said, oof, guys, this wind and solar is the way to go. It's cheap. It works. They would have done it voluntarily decades ago if there was a free market solution, but they don't work. So they only work because government forces them on us. And then even then they don't work, right? But China's the beneficiary. So these green groups that are funding the Biden re-election campaign, these green groups that are demonstrating by tearing down art, pouring paint on sculptures, lying down in traffic, these green groups, who funds them? Where does their money come from? What is their mission? Their mission is not about anything benefiting America. It all seems to benefit foreign countries. I think there's got to be a huge investigation to open up these groups and see who they really are actors for. Because as far as I'm concerned, they are traitorous organizations that are acting as foreign agents. They are a threat to our freedom, our property, and they have to be destroyed. This is plain and simple.
And the way to do that is what Walt has done here. And that is to create a film with the Socratic questioning, the questions that people are wondering without rant or rhetoric, bring in experts. And Daniel, a little bit of light, a little bit of truth goes a long way. That's what you're doing at Power of the Future. Dave, I know that you had some other things that you wanted to ask Daniel.
Well, Daniel, first of all, I want to thank you for spending this time and in adding your voice to this effort that we have to promote a climate conversation and to engage what I call the middle out. There's an awful lot of people who have an awful lot of common sense. If they had a voice, that could be amplified. It would be wonderful. This film is a megaphone for them. And it starts with providing some really basic information about the connection between a slightly warmer Earth and human flourishing. It's so evident in world history, so easy to see. But I wonder, what if you were going to make a follow-up film? This is a thing. I don't know if Walt wants me to ask this or not. But if you were going to make a follow-up film to this first one, what would you focus on? And I mean, I love your circle of stupid idea, but it is a kind of what's the next layer of this onion in helping people become involved and encouraged and effective?
Well,
only if Kim moderates it, that's for sure.
we laugh because partway through the film, Kim picked up on it. I looked pretty somber, and I really felt I was driven to do this. I felt I was divinely inspired to do this film, and someone had to do something. And so I put all this in there, and the way the filming was going, it looked really strange. And I just thought, well, maybe I was hallucinating and lost all my retirement. I mean,
Yeah.
that was hard to smile a lot during the filming.
Yeah.
But then it was Kim and Colton, our producer, that really made it. They went an extra mile afterwards that I didn't see, and put the Socratic part in and back and forth in different scenes. And then I pitched in to help them sneak some footage out of the Congo that we weren't supposed to have, and got that in there, put it in the film. And so people could see what's going on. But it all came together so good that I just feel lucky. Now, I put the script together, the ideas, but they made it alive. And I think I'd have to talk to Colton and Kim first before I did anything. But we still need to, I think, address fertilizer. That's something that's near and dear to my heart, because they're in the Netherlands, they're trying to outlaw fertilizer, and it's not far from happening here. And if we outlaw fertilizer, I figure our planet will support about 3 billion people. That's a lot less than now. And we're all going to have a rough time. And somewhere we have to wake up and really begin to ask tough questions. And Ken Gregory is the one that calculated whether it'll be $1.1 million for every adult in the U.S., but only half of the adults pay income tax. So that means if you're working, you got to pay twice that much, or we got to shake out the nursing homes and put people to work. I don't know, but we just have things that I don't see as possible to do. And one thing you've noticed is Senator John Kerry from Louisiana was drilling someone from the dais exactly how much is this going to cost. And I know he's coming to Colorado next month, and I have purchased a ticket to dinner with him. So he's going to get a copy of our film and a little earful at the same time.
Kim, let me say that. I flubbed your question there. What I wanted to do actually was to point people toward Power of the Future, because really, if you were hungry for information about this topic, I can't recommend more full-throatedly a visit to powerofthefuture.com. I think it's a remarkable nexus of useful information, and it's beautifully curated. It's not 5-hour disquisitions on CNBC. It's thoughtful commentary in the right, curated properly and organized in the right way. If you want to learn about a particular topic and go deep, or you want to learn more broadly and horizontally about this topic, videos, blogs, articles, thought pieces, connections, links, a terrific website put together by terrific people, and a great compliment to this movie and to our website, climateconversation.com.
Well, and Daniel, we thank you for your testimony also, that we really appreciate that. But changing gears just a little bit, you're over here public policy. Have you ever had any experience in the political arena?
Yes, I actually started in the political space and advocacy, but yeah, my besides working on some presidential and Senate races, but my pride and joy was when my uncle ran for Congress back in 2010, after a little scandal in New York City when a guy named Anthony Weiner had to resign suddenly, and there was an open seat. And so the only member of the family who had kind of worked in politics, I got the second call after my uncle called my dad and said, I think I'm going to run for that seat. And New York ended up with one conservative member from the House of Representatives. And then they had the census redistricting of 2010, and surprise, surprise, they got rid of his district. So he served one term, and they got rid of him really quickly.
That had to be a lot of fun, and I think God has such a funny sense of humor. When it was Anthony Weiner that ended up, with all that, it was hysterical to watch all of that. So I think, Dave, have we missed anything? Is there anything else as the spokesperson for Climate Conversation? Is there anything else we need?
I think anyone who watches this is going to be very glad they did, and they're going to benefit from the information delivered by a remarkable individual. So I think you've done a great job here, Kim.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave O'Rourke. And again, you're doing great work. Walt, is there anything else that we need to ask?
No, I just wanted to thank you again for doing this and the excitement you bring, not to our podcast, but to your whole movement entirely. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. You and Ramey are dear friends, and it's great to be in this journey with you. And Daniel Turner, it was so great to meet you when you were in Colorado. We've had so many important conversations on the Kim Monson show. And it's so interesting. When you talk about important things with people, you get to know their heart and where they're at. And I know that you love rural America, but rural America feeds and fuels us. And that's what's so important for people to understand. So what's your final thought, Daniel Turner?
It's great to be with you, and thank you, Walt, for financing such a very important film. If you watch this movie, you can only take away one conclusion. It is so simple. It is so clear. And if you don't draw that, if you're still, nope, this is all a lie, well, now you've bordered on religion. And that's understandable, because I hold my religious beliefs and they're unchangeable. But this isn't religion, right? This is policy. This is supposed to be science. And what you did in putting this film together for the average American who is bombarded by these topics on food prices and meat prices and foreign policy and how come this and they want to ban that. If you just took the time to sit down and watch this film, you'll have such an understanding of these issues. It's for someone who's always looking for support, to know there are men and your wife as well, men and women out there who support good causes. I mean, you've done yeoman's work, and the country owes you a debt of gratitude for this very important film. So it's an honor to be on this podcast with you, and thank you for including me in this conversation.
Thank you.
Daniel Turner, Power of the Future, thank you so much. Dave O'Rourke, spokesperson for Climate Conversation, always great to be with you. And Walt Johnson, what you and Ramey have done is something that I think founding fathers had thought about. What do we pass on to the next generation? And I think that's really one of the reasons that you have done this film. So Walt, thank you to you and Ramey. And thank you for joining us for our podcast, A Climate Conversation. And again, thank you to Daniel Turner, our guest with Power of the Future.
Thank you.
Thanks.